heat in Guadalajara was a living thing that August afternoon, thick enough to choke on, pressing down on the cobblestones until they shimmered like water that would never come. The Mercado district hummed with voices haggling over mangoes and copper pots, mariachi music bleeding from a cantina 2 streets over, the smell of grilled corn and exhaust fumes mixing in the trapped air between buildings painted yellow and blue and terracotta red. María Fuentes moved through the crowd like a ghost, one hand pressed against the curve of her stomach, 8 months swollen, heavy as a stone. The other hand clutched a crumpled photograph folded small enough to hide in her palm. She couldn't lose it, not after 3 days of running, not after everything she'd sacrificed to steal it. Her vision swam, the faces around her blurred into flesh-colored shapes, mouths moving without sound. When was the last time she'd eaten? Yesterday morning. Stale bread from a gas station outside Tlaquepaque. When was the last time she'd drunk water? Dawn. From a public fountain in a park where homeless men slept on benches and pigeons fought over crumbs. The sun hammered down without mercy. Sweat soaked through her thin cotton dress, the fabric clinging to her skin like a second layer she couldn't shed. Her legs trembled with each step, just a little farther, just to the bus station. Just far enough to disappear into another city, another name, another life where Diego Maldonado couldn't find her. But her body had other plans. The world tilted sideways between a fruit vendor's stall, pyramids of papayas going soft in the heat, and a shuttered pharmacy with iron bars across the windows. Her knees buckled, the photograph slipped from her fingers. She reached for it as she fell, her palms scraping across hot stone, and the last sound she heard before darkness swallowed her whole was a child's voice, high and terrified, screaming, "Señor, ayuda." Then nothing, just the roar of blood in her ears and the sensation of falling into a heat that had no bottom. When consciousness flickered back, the first thing María felt was cold. Not the absence of heat, but actual cold, artificial and biting against her fever-hot skin. Air conditioning, the hum of an engine beneath her, leather seats smooth and expensive under her cheek. She forced her eyes open. The world came into focus slowly, blurred at the edges like a photograph left too long in water. She was in a car, moving. The windows were tinted so dark the sunlight outside looked blue. A man sat beside her, not touching, just watching. His stillness was the kind that came from absolute control, the sort of calm that made you understand he could move fast if he chose to, but rarely needed to. He was older than her, maybe 40, with gray threading through black hair at his temples. His face was all angles, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, eyes the color of smoke. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no tie, and a watch that probably cost more than everything María had ever owned combined. "Easy," he said in Spanish, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk. "Don't try to sit up yet, you fainted. We're taking you to a hospital." The word hospital hit her like electricity. She tried to push herself upright, panic flooding her veins. No hospitals, they'll find me, he'll find me. The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind those smoke-colored eyes. Recognition, or maybe understanding. Who's looking for you? Maria's throat was sandpaper. Her tongue felt too thick for her mouth, but she knew this moment mattered, knew that whatever she said next would decide whether she lived or died. So she said the name that had been chasing her across 3 states like a shadow with teeth. Diego Maldonado. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Even the driver's shoulders tensed, his hands tightening on the steering wheel, because everyone in Jalisco knew that name. Diego Maldonado, who smiled in newspaper photographs at charity galas and murdered people in warehouses on the same night. Diego Maldonado, who controlled half the state's distribution networks with one hand and ran a legitimate pharmaceutical empire with the other. Diego Maldonado, whose enemies disappeared so completely their families stopped asking questions. The man beside her studied her face for a long moment. His gaze was clinical, measuring, as if he were solving an equation in his head. Then he leaned forward slightly and spoke to the driver, his tone absolutely final. "Change of plans, take us to the private facility in Zapopan. No records." "Jefe," the driver said carefully, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "If she belongs to Maldonado." "She doesn't belong to anyone." The man's voice didn't rise, didn't harden. It simply became immovable, like a door closing. "Drive." Maria's vision was clearing now, the edges of the world sharpening into focus. She could see details. The way his shirt was tailored perfectly to his frame. The faint scar above his left eyebrow. The gold ring on his right hand, thick and plain, the kind that could break a jaw if swung correctly. "Who are you?" she whispered. He turned back to her, and for the first time, something almost human crossed his face. Not quite sympathy, more like recognition of shared territory, 2 people who understood the same dark geography. Alejandro Vargas. Name landed like a stone in water, sending ripples through everything María thought she understood about her situation. Alejandro Vargas, the CEO, they called him in business circles, though everyone knew his real empire wasn't listed on any stock exchange. He controlled logistics across 3 states, legitimate trucking companies, import-export firms, pharmaceutical distribution contracts, and beneath all that legitimacy, the other thing. The thing no one spoke about in daylight but everyone knew existed. He was Diego's competitor, not his enemy exactly. They had a truce, the kind of uneasy peace that kept the violence from spilling into the streets where tourists could see it, but competitors nonetheless. Two kings in the same kingdom, careful never to cross into each other's territory. Your enemies, Maria said, her voice barely audible. Competitors, Alejandro corrected, his tone precise. But that's my problem, not yours. Right now you need a doctor. When was the last time you ate? Yesterday. Water. This morning. He nodded once, then reached into a compartment built into the car door and pulled out a bottle of water, still cold, condensation beating on the plastic. He opened it and handed it to her. Maria took it with trembling hands and drank. The water was so cold it hurt going down, but she didn't stop until half the bottle was gone. When she finally lowered it, gasping, she found Alejandro still watching her with that same measuring. Guys, thank you, she managed. Don't thank me yet. He glanced out the window at the city sliding past, buildings and palm trees and billboards advertising beer and cell phones. Helping you is going to cost me, possibly everything. So before we go any further, I need to know what you did that made Diego Maldonado want you dead badly enough to let you run for 3 days, instead of just putting a bullet in your head the first night. Maria's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, to the life growing there that didn't know yet what kind of world it was being born into. She thought about lying, thought about saying she'd stolen money, or witnessed something she shouldn't have, or slept with the wrong man. But Alejandro Vargas had kind eyes despite the danger in them, and Maria was so tired of lying. I found his real ledgers, she said quietly, the ones that show where the money actually comes from. Names, routes, politicians on payroll, cops who look the other way, everything. Hidden behind his pharmaceutical company, I photographed them, and I sent them to the DEA. Alejandro went very still, not tense, just absolutely motionless like a predator that's caught a scent. Why? Maria met his eyes, because he killed my brother, and because some debts can't be paid with silence. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The car hummed through traffic, the air conditioning whispered. Outside, Guadalajara burned under the merciless sun. Then Alejandro Vargas did something unexpected. He smiled. It was a small smile, sad and knowing, the kind that acknowledged pain without trying to fix it. Then we're going to need more than just a doctor, he said. We're going to need a plan. The private facility didn't look like a hospital. It looked like a mansion pretending to be something else, all white walls and terracotta roof tiles, tucked behind iron gates in Zapopan's wealthiest neighborhood where the streets were clean and the police never asked questions. They didn't want answered. Palm trees lined the circular driveway. Bougainvillea spilled over the walls in explosions of purple and red. A fountain burbled in the courtyard, the sound of water almost obscene in a city where people still fought over wells in the poorer barrios. The car pulled to a stop beneath a portico where the sunlight couldn't reach. 2 men in suits emerged from the building's entrance before Alejandro had even opened his door. Not doctors, security. Their eyes swept the car, the street beyond the gates, the rooflines of neighboring houses. One spoke quietly into a radio clipped to his collar. Alejandro stepped out first, then turned and offered Maria his hand. She took it, grateful, because her legs still felt like water, and the world kept tilting in ways that had nothing to do with dehydration. Can you walk? He asked. I think so. Good, lean on me if you need to. She did, not because she wanted to appear weak, but because pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. They moved slowly across the courtyard, past the fountain where goldfish the color of sunset drifted like dreams beneath lily pads. The guards flanked them but kept their distance, professional and silent. Inside, the air was even cooler, almost cold. The floors were polished marble. The walls were decorated with abstract art that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. A woman in pale blue scrubs waited in the foyer, her expression carefully neutral. Dr. Salazar is ready, she said to Alejandro, not to Maria, as if Maria were cargo rather than a person. Good. Alejandro's hand remained on Maria's elbow, steady and warm. Make sure she has everything she needs. Food first, then examination. No one contacts anyone outside this building. No records. Understood, senor. They guided Maria down a hallway lined with closed doors, each one presumably hiding someone else's secret. At the end of the corridor, a room waited with windows overlooking a garden where hummingbirds fought over feeders filled with sugar water. The bed had clean white sheets. There was a private bathroom, a chair by the window. It looked more like a hotel room than a hospital. Maria sank onto the bed, suddenly so exhausted she could barely hold her head up. The adrenaline that had kept her running for 3 days was finally draining away, leaving nothing but the weight of her body and the baby inside it. Dr. Salazar entered moments later, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that had seen enough to stop being surprised by anything. She set her medical bag on the side table and turned to Alejandro. I'll need privacy for the examination. Alejandro nodded. I'll be outside. He glanced at Maria one last time, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. Concern, real concern, not the practiced kind. You're safe here. No one will hurt you. Then he was gone, and Maria was alone with the doctor. Examination was thorough but gentle. Blood pressure, temperature, heart rate, listening to the baby's heartbeat through a handheld Doppler that made Maria's daughter sound like a tiny galloping horse. Questions about her last meal, her symptoms, how far along she was. 8 months, Maria said, maybe 8.5, I'm not exactly sure. Dr. Salazar's expression didn't change, and the father. Not in the picture. I see, the doctor made notes on a tablet. You're dehydrated and malnourished. The baby's heartbeat is strong, but you've put significant stress on your body. Another day or two like this and you could have gone into premature labor. She paused, or worse. Maria's hand moved to her stomach. But she's okay, the baby's okay. For now, we'll start an IV, get fluids and nutrients into you. You'll need complete bed rest for at least a week. After that, we'll reassess. Dr. Salazar's gaze was steady, professional, but not unkind. Senor Vargas has made it clear that you're to receive whatever care you need. No questions asked. That's rare in my experience. You must be very important to him. I'm not, Maria said quietly. I'm nobody. And he's helping you for another reason. The doctor began preparing the IV. In my line of work, I've learned that powerful men don't risk their position for nobody. So whatever you are to him, or whatever you represent, it matters. Remember that. After the IV was placed and Maria had eaten soup and bread and fruit that tasted like heaven after days of nothing, she was left alone to rest. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept spinning, replaying the last 72 hours on an endless loop. Running, always running. Cheap hotels where she paid in cash and used fake names. Bus stations where she kept her head down and her sunglasses on. The constant, gnawing fear that every man in a suit was one of Diego's, that every car following too close was the one that would end her. She'd been so careful. For 2 years she'd played the role perfectly. Diego's office manager, efficient, quiet, invisible. She organized his calendar, filed his paperwork, smiled at his business associates, and never asked questions about the meetings that happened after midnight or the shipments that arrived without manifests. But she'd watched and she'd remembered. And when Diego had killed Marco, her younger brother, her only family, and staged it to look like a cartel execution, something inside Maria had broken in a way that could never be repaired. Marco had been trying to get out. He worked distribution for Diego for 3 years, driving trucks full of legitimate pharmaceuticals and occasionally hidden in false bottom containers the other product, the profitable one. He'd saved enough money to start over. He was going to move to Monterrey, get a real job, maybe go back to school. Diego had made an example of him, to show the others what happened when you tried to leave. They'd found Marco's body in a dumpster behind a nightclub in Tonalá, his hands zip-tied, a single bullet in the back of his head. The newspapers called it cartel violence. The police filed a report and closed the case within a week. No one looked for justice, because in Jalisco, you didn't look for justice when Diego Maldonado was involved. You looked the other way and thanked God it wasn't you. Maria couldn't look away. She'd spent 6 months planning, learning where Diego kept his real records, the ones that showed the money trails, the payoffs, the names of everyone who helped him move product across state lines. She'd waited for her chance, and when Diego had left his office unlocked one night, distracted by a meeting with distributors from Sinaloa, she'd taken it. 47 photographs, every page of the ledgers, every name, every number, every route. She'd sent them to the DEA through an anonymous email account, using a VPN and a burner phone she'd immediately destroyed. Then she'd walked back into Diego's office the next morning and filed his expense reports like nothing had happened. It took 3 days for Diego to figure out the leak came from inside. 2 more days to narrow it down to his inner circle. When he'd called Maria into his office that afternoon, his smile had been cold enough to freeze blood. "You've been with me a long time, Maria," he'd said, pouring tequila into 2 glasses. "You're like family." She'd known then, the way a rabbit knows when the hawk's shadow crosses its path. She'd smiled back and accepted the glass and made an excuse about needing to finish payroll. Then she'd walked out of his office, grabbed her purse, and run. That had been 3 days ago, 3 days of buses and backroads and sleeping in her car until she'd sold the car for cash. 3 days of Diego's men searching, asking questions, showing her photograph to hotel clerks and gas station attendants. She'd made it as far as Guadalajara before her body gave out. And then Alejandro Vargas had found her. A knock at the door pulled Maria from her thoughts. She sat up carefully, the IV tugging at her arm. "Come in." Alejandro entered, changed now into dark slacks and a black button-down shirt. He'd showered. She could smell the faint scent of soap and something else, cologne maybe, expensive and subtle. He carried a tray with more food, a sandwich and juice and sliced mango. "Dr. Salazar says you need to eat every few hours," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "How are you feeling?" "Better, tired, confused." "Confused about what?" Maria gestured vaguely at the room, the building him. "Why you're doing this, you said it yourself, helping me costs you. Diego will find out eventually. You'll lose your truce, maybe worse, so why?" Alejandro pulled the chair from the window and sat, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. For a long moment he just looked at her, and Maria had the sense that he was deciding something. weighing truth against safety. Honesty against armor. Finally, he spoke. 8 years ago, I had a sister, Valentina. She was younger than me by 6 years, beautiful, smart, too trusting for the world we lived in. His voice was steady, but something beneath it pulled tight like wire about to snap. She married a man, Jorge Ruiz. He seemed respectable, ran a construction company, went to church, smiled at all the right times. He paused. Outside, the hummingbirds darted between flowers, tiny jewels in the fading light. Behind closed doors, Jorge was different, violent, controlling. Valentina tried to hide it, but I saw the bruises, the excuses, the way she flinched when he raised his voice. Alejandro's jaw tightened. I was building the business then, expanding. Every day was meetings, negotiations, territory disputes. I was so focused on becoming powerful that I told myself I didn't have time for family problems. Maria's chest ached. She knew where this story was going. Valentina got pregnant. She came to me and said she wanted to leave Jorge, that she was afraid of what he'd do to the baby. I told her. He stopped, exhaled slowly. I told her to go back, to work it out, that I couldn't afford distractions, that she was overreacting. The silence stretched between them, heavy as stone. 3 months later, she fell down the stairs at her house. That's what the police report said. Accidental death. Jorge cried at the funeral, gave a beautiful eulogy. Everyone believed him. But you didn't, Maria whispered. No. Alejandro's eyes met hers, and in them she saw something she recognized, grief that had calcified into purpose. I had Jorge investigated privately, found 6 other women he'd been with before Valentina. 3 had restraining orders, 1 had disappeared. The investigator said we'd never prove anything, so I didn't try to prove it. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Maria understood the language of power and what happened to men who hurt the wrong persons. Family. Jorge Ruiz's construction company went bankrupt 6 months later, Alejandro continued quietly. He left Jalisco. Last I heard, he was working day labor in Tijuana, barely surviving. Some people would call that justice. I just call it insufficient. He leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking softly. So when I saw you collapse in the Mercado, 8 months pregnant and running from a man who wants you dead, I didn't see a stranger. I saw my sister. A second chance I don't deserve, but maybe need anyway. Maria's throat was tight. I'm not asking you to save me. I know you're trying to save yourself. That's exactly why I'm helping. He stood, moved back to the window, hands in his pockets. The world I live in, Maria, it's built on taking. Power, money, territory, everything is about taking. But every once in a while, a man gets the chance to give something back, to be more than what his empire demands. He turned to face her. I'm not a good man, I've done things that would make you stop looking at me like I'm your savior. But maybe just this once I can be better than I am. Maybe that's worth more than a truce with Diego Maldonado. Maria felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. He'll come for me, you know that. He won't stop. I know. And when he does, people will die. Probably. You could still walk away. Give me money, a car, send me somewhere far from here. You'd keep your truce, your business, everything. Alejandro smiled, sad and knowing. I could, but then I'd have to live with it, and I've spent 8 years living with one failure. I don't think I can survive another. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the handle. Get some rest, tomorrow we'll start planning. Diego's looking for you, but he doesn't know you're here yet. That gives us a little time, not much, but enough. Alejandro, Maria said softly, and he turned. Thank you, whatever happens, thank you. He nodded once, then left, closing the door quietly behind him. Maria lay back against the pillows, one hand on her stomach, feeling her daughter move inside her. Alive, safe, at least for now. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the garden in shades of gold and orange and deep purple. The hummingbirds had settled for the night. The fountain continued its eternal whisper. And somewhere in Guadalajara, Diego Maldonado was searching. The war hadn't started yet, but both sides knew it was coming. Some debts, Maria thought, can only be paid in blood. She just hoped it wouldn't be hers. The first 3 days passed in a blur of rest and recovery. Maria slept more than she had in months, deep dreamless sleep that her body craved like water. Dr. Salazar visited twice daily, monitoring her vitals, adjusting her IV, bringing prenatal vitamins and protein shakes that tasted like chalk but worked like medicine. By the 4th day, Maria's strength had returned enough that lying in bed felt like a cage. She began walking the garden in the morning, slowly at first, one hand on her lower back, the other trailing along the stone wall where Jasmine climbed toward the sun. The air smelled like flowers and distant rain, though the sky remained stubbornly clear. Alejandro appeared each evening, always at sunset, always with the same careful distance. He asked how she felt, if she needed anything, whether Dr. Salazar had concerns. He never stayed long, never sat too close, as if proximity might break some unspoken rule they both understood but neither acknowledged. On the 5th evening, Maria was sitting in the garden when she heard footsteps on the gravel path, not Alejandro's measured stride. These were quicker, anxious. A young man rounded the corner, mid-20s, dressed in an expensive suit that couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm. When he saw Maria, he stopped abruptly. I'm sorry, Senora, I didn't know anyone was. It's fine, Maria said. I was just leaving. No, please stay, I just need to. He gestured vaguely toward the house, clearly uncomfortable. I need to speak with Alejandro, business. Rafael, Alejandro's voice came from the doorway behind them, calm but edged with something sharp. I told you to wait inside. The young man, Rafael, flinched slightly. Yes, Jefe, I just thought. Wait inside. Rafael nodded quickly and disappeared into the house, leaving his anxiety hanging in the air like smoke. Alejandro approached Maria, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. I apologize, my men know better than to disturb you. He wasn't disturbing me, Maria said. He looked worried, though. Business problems. Alejandro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Diego's moving against you. It wasn't a question. For a moment, Alejandro said nothing. Then he sat on the stone bench beside her, careful to maintain space between them. How did you know? Because that's what he does. When someone crosses him, he doesn't attack directly. He cuts the roots, suppliers, contracts, allies. He makes you bleed slowly so you don't realize you're dying until it's too late. Maria looked at him steadily. What has he taken so far? Alejandro exhaled slowly. 2 shipping contracts in the last 3 days. A warehouse lease that was supposed to be renewed, suddenly under review. One of my distribution partners received a visit from inspectors. Very thorough, very convenient timing. He's mapping your operation, finding weak points. I know. And you're letting him. I'm being careful, Alejandro corrected. Diego doesn't know you're here yet. If I respond too aggressively, he'll know something changed. He'll start asking what or who. Maria was quiet for a moment, watching the last light fade from the sky. The garden was turning blue with twilight. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I can help, she said. Finally. Alejandro turned to look at her. You need to rest, focus on staying healthy. I've been resting for 5 days. I'm not fragile, Alejandro. I'm pregnant, not broken. She met his eyes. I worked for Diego for 2 years. I know how he thinks, how he operates. I know his patterns. You're fighting him blind, but I can see. Mario, let me see your files, your contracts, your business structure, everything. Let me show you where he'll hit next. Alejandro studied her for a long moment, and she could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Risk versus reward, pride versus practicality. Why, he asked quietly, you're safe here. You could just wait this out, let me handle it, and when it's over. When it's over, I'll have survived on your mercy, Maria interrupted. I've spent 2 years being powerless, Alejandro, watching, waiting, pretending to be smaller than I am so men like Diego wouldn't see me as a threat. I'm done being invisible. Let me fight. The silence between them stretched like a wire pulled taut. Then Alejandro stood and offered his hand. Come on, I'll show you the war room. The war room was on the 2nd floor, a converted office with windows overlooking the front gates. Computers lined one wall, monitors displaying security feeds, financial data, shipping manifests. A large table dominated the center of the room, covered in papers, maps, photographs. 3 men were working when Alejandro and Maria entered. They looked up sharply, surprise flashing across their faces before they could mask it. Rafael, the nervous young man from the garden, an older man with gray hair and calculating eyes, and a third, built like a boxer, with scarred knuckles and a gun visible at his hip. Gentlemen, Alejandro said calmly, this is Maria. She'll be working with us. The older man, who Maria would later learn was called Torres, frowned. Jefe is that wise, if Maldonado. Maldonado is already moving against us. Maria knows his operation better than anyone in this room, better than anyone in this city, probably. Alejandro pulled out a chair for her. She stays. Torres didn't look happy, but he nodded. The others followed suit, though skepticism radiated from them like heat. Maria ignored it. She'd spent 2 years in rooms full of men who underestimated her. Their doubt was familiar, almost comforting. She approached the table, scanning the documents spread across its surface. Contracts, financial statements, shipping routes marked in different colors. It was organized but defensive, reactive rather than strategic. Walk me through it, she said. Everything Diego's done in the last week. Rafael glanced at Alejandro, who nodded. Then he began. 7 days ago, one of our pharmaceutical suppliers in Monterrey received an anonymous tip that we were moving unlicensed product. They pulled our contract pending investigation. Unlicensed product, Maria asked. Legitimate medicine, but imported through unofficial channels to avoid tariffs, Torres explained. Gray area, not illegal, but not entirely clean either. Maria nodded. What else? 5 days ago, the boxer, whose name was Santiago, continued. Our warehouse lease in Tlaquepaque wasn't renewed. The owner said he sold the property. We checked. He sold it to a shell corporation. Did you trace the shell? Dead-end offshore accounts, anonymous ownership structure. That's Diego, Maria said quietly. He owns at least 15 shells I know about, maybe more now. What else? Yesterday, Rafael said, our distribution partner in Zapopan, a trucking company, had surprise inspections. Federal agents, they found minor violations, nothing serious, but enough to shut down operations for 2 weeks. Maria closed her eyes, thinking. She'd seen Diego do this before, not to Alejandro but to smaller rivals, men who'd crossed him or competition he wanted eliminated. The pattern was always the same. He's testing your response. Time, she said, opening her eyes. Each attack is bigger than the last. The supplier was minor, easy to replace. The warehouse was more significant but not critical. The trucking company, that hurts. You need those trucks to move product, and 2 weeks without them means delayed shipments, angry clients, broken contracts. We have backup transportation, Torres said defensively. But at what cost? You'll pay premium rates for last-minute alternatives. Your profit margins shrink. Your clients start wondering if you're reliable. Some of them start looking at other options. Maria turned to Alejandro. What's your largest contract right now, the one you can't afford to lose? Alejandro's expression darkened. Import contract with a medical supply chain in Mexico City. 60 million pesos a year. Renewal is up for review in 2 weeks. That's where he'll hit next, Maria said with certainty. He'll find a way to make you look unstable, unreliable, late deliveries, quality issues. Anything that makes them question the renewal. How do you know? Santiago asked, his tone skeptical. Maria looked at him steadily. Because that's exactly what he did to a competitor in Veracruz 18 months ago. A man named Ochoa who controlled medical supplies along the Gulf Coast. Diego wanted that territory. He spent 6 months slowly destabilizing Ochoa's biggest contracts. By the time Ochoa realized what was happening, he lost too much credibility to recover. He sold his business to Diego for 20 cents on the dollar. I remember Ochoa, Torres said slowly. He hanged himself in his office 3 months after the sale. No, Maria said quietly. He didn't, but that's what the police report said. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of computers and the distant traffic beyond the gates. Alejandro leaned against the table, arms crossed, studying Maria with new intensity. If you're right, if he hits the Mexico City contract, how do we stop him? Don't stop him, you're already moving too slowly, playing defense. By the time you react to one attack, he's already planning the next. Maria moved to the map on the wall, studying the routes and territories marked in different colors. You need to stop thinking like a businessman and start thinking like he does. Which is? Like a predator, he doesn't just want to hurt you. He wants to own you, absorb your territory after he breaks you. She turned back to the room. So you give him what he wants, sort of. Rafael frowned. I don't understand. You let him think he's winning. Let the Mexico City contract look vulnerable. Let him invest resources in attacking it. Meanwhile, you do what he's not expecting. Which is? Alejandro asked, though Maria could see in his eyes that he was already following her logic. You go legitimate, completely, genuinely legitimate. Take everything gray and make it white. Every contract, every supplier, every route, make it so clean that even federal investigators would find nothing. That's the one thing Diego can't fight. Torres shook his head. That's impossible. Half our profit comes from the gray areas, the unofficial imports, the flexible accounting, the vulnerabilities, Maria interrupted. Every shortcut you take is a weapon Diego can use against you. But if you eliminate those vulnerabilities, if you make everything legal and transparent, he has nothing to attack. He can't use inspectors or anonymous tips or bureaucratic pressure if there's nothing to find. We'd lose 30% of our revenue, Santiago said flatly. In the short term, yes, but you'd keep the 70% Diego can't touch, and eventually you'd rebuild the 30% from clean sources. Maria looked at Alejandro. You'd survive. Diego would keep bleeding resources trying to attack an operation that's untouchable through conventional means. Alejandro was quiet, his mind clearly working through the implications. The others waited, watching him. Finally, he spoke. How long would the transition take? With the right help, 3 weeks, maybe 4. And you can help with that. Maria smiled grimly. I can do more than help. I can show you exactly how to do it. I spent 2 years watching Diego build his legitimate facade while hiding the real operation underneath. I know every trick, every accounting method, every legal structure he uses. I can teach you to beat him at his own game. Torres leaned back in his chair, reassessing. She's right. If we go clean, Maldonado loses his main advantage. He can't compete in the legitimate market. His pharmaceutical company only works because of the illegal distribution underneath. If we're genuinely legal, we'll have better prices, better terms, better everything. It's a long game, Rafael said slowly. We'd be vulnerable during the transition. We're already vulnerable, Alejandro replied. He looked at Maria and something passed between them, understanding. Trust, partnership. All right, he said, we do it your way, show us how. Maria approached the table and began pulling documents, organizing them into categories. The men gathered around her, skepticism giving way to interest as she explained the framework, how to restructure the business, which contracts to modify, which suppliers to cut, how to move money through clean channels. She worked for 3 hours straight, her voice steady, her mind sharp. These were skills she'd learned in Diego's shadow, watching him build his empire on a foundation of legitimate business and illegal profit. Now she would use those same skills to destroy him. Outside, the night deepened. The city lights beyond the gates glowed like distant fires. Inside the war room, a new kind of battle was being planned, not with guns or violence, but with ledgers and contracts and the kind of warfare that happened in boardrooms and government offices. When they finally stopped for the night, Torres approached Maria as the others filed out. "I underestimated you," he said simply. "Most people do," Maria replied. "That's usually their first mistake." He smiled, a rare expression that softened his weathered face. Diego's second mistake was letting you live long enough to run. His third will be not realizing you're the real threat. After he left, Maria remained in the war room, staring at the maps and documents. Somewhere in Guadalajara, Diego was planning his next move. Somewhere in this very city, men were asking questions, showing her photograph, getting closer. But for the first time since she'd run, Maria wasn't just afraid. She was ready. Alejandro appeared in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one. "You should rest," he said. "So should you." "I will eventually." He moved to stand beside her, both of them looking at the map. "Thank you for this, for helping." "Don't thank me yet, we still have to execute the plan, and Diego will fight back harder. Once he realizes what we're doing." "I know." Alejandro took a sip of his coffee, "but for the first time in a week, I feel like I'm not fighting blind." Maria turned to look at him. In the dim light, the angles of his face were softer, more human. "You're risking everything for me, your business, your safety, maybe your life. Why?" He was quiet for a moment, then, "Because some fights are worth having, some people are worth protecting, and maybe, if I do this right, I can be the man I should have been for my sister." "You can't save her by saving me." "I know, but maybe I can forgive myself, someday." They stood together in the silence, 2 people bound by loss and necessity, and something neither of them had words for yet. Outside, the city breathed its nightly rhythm, sirens and music and the eternal hum of traffic. The war was coming, but they would be ready. The transition began the next morning. Alejandro's empire, built over 15 years of careful expansion and calculated risk, started to reshape itself like a living organism adapting to survive. Contracts were reviewed by lawyers who asked no questions but understood everything. Suppliers were vetted through legitimate channels. Import paperwork that had once been filed with creative interpretations was now meticulously accurate. Every gray area was bleached white, even when it cost more, even when it hurt. Maria coordinated most of it from the war room, working 12-hour days despite Dr. Salazar's protests. Her pregnancy had become both shield and weapon. No one suspected a woman 8 months pregnant of being the strategic mind behind a corporate restructuring. She was invisible again, but this time by choice. The first week passed without incident. Too quiet, Torres observed one evening, like the silence before lightning. He was right. On the 8th day, the Mexico City contract collapsed, not because of quality issues or late deliveries, but because the medical supply chain received an offer they couldn't refuse: better prices, faster shipping, guaranteed inventory. The offer came from a newly formed company with spotless credentials and backing from investors whose names appeared on no public records. Diego's move: elegant, devastating, perfectly legal. Alejandro took the news in his office, Maria and Torres present. He listened to Rafael deliver the report, his expression unchanging. When the young man finished, Alejandro simply nodded. "Expected," he said calmly. "What's our exposure?" 60 million in annual revenue, Rafael replied, his voice tight with stress. "We have 3 other contracts that depend on the Mexico City logistics. If they see us losing the primary, they might reconsider renewals." "Then we don't let them see us lose." Alejandro turned to Maria. "Options." Maria had already been thinking through scenarios. "We can't compete with Diego's offer if he's subsidizing it with illegal profit, but we can make ourselves valuable in other ways. Diversification. If the Mexico City chain won't renew, we pivot to smaller regional contracts, 10 contracts at 6 million each instead of one at 60. That's more administrative overhead," Torres pointed out. "More stability, harder for Diego to attack. He can buy out one big contract with a massive offer. He can't buy out 10 smaller ones without bleeding cash he doesn't have." Maria pulled up a map on her tablet. "There are medical facilities in Puebla, Cartel, Aguascalientes, all underserved by current suppliers. We offer better terms than they're getting now. We build relationships. We become essential." Alejandro studied the map, timeline. 2 weeks to make initial contact, 4 weeks to finalize contracts. We'd be vulnerable during the transition, but once they're signed, we'd have better diversification than before. "Do it." Alejandro looked at Rafael. "Start making calls. Torres, I need risk assessment on each potential partner." Maria: "Coordinate with our legal team. I want every contract airtight." They dispersed to execute the plan, but Diego wasn't finished. 3 days later, a fire broke out at one of Alejandro's warehouses in Tlajomulco. The official report called it electrical failure. The fire inspector found no evidence of arson, but the timing was surgical. The warehouse had been stocking inventory for a major shipment to Puebla, part of the new strategy María had designed. 2 million pesos of medical supplies turned to ash. Alejandro stood in the ruins the next morning, María beside him. The smell of burned plastic and charred wood hung in the air. Insurance investigators picked through the wreckage, taking photographs, making notes. Electrical failure, one of them said to Alejandro. Bad wiring in the main junction box. These older buildings, it happens. This building was renovated 8 months ago, Alejandro replied, his voice dangerously quiet. The electrical system was completely replaced. The investigator shrugged. Sometimes contractors cut corners. We'll include it in the report. After he left, María touched Alejandro's arm. He's been paid. The report will say whatever Diego needs it to say. I know. Alejandro's jaw was tight. The only sign of the fury she knew was burning beneath his calm exterior. This is the third direct hit. The contracts, the warehouse, and yesterday one of our trucking supervisors quit without notice, took a job with a competitor. Diego's accelerating. He knows we're adapting. María looked at the blackened skeleton of the warehouse. He's trying to break you before you finish restructuring. Is it working? She turned to face him. Are you broken? No. Then he's failing. That afternoon, María made a decision. She'd been careful until now, staying invisible, working behind the scenes. But Diego was escalating, and defense alone wouldn't win this war. It was time to go on offense. She waited until evening when Alejandro returned to the facility. She found him in his private office, a room she'd never entered before. It was surprisingly simple: a desk, chairs, a bookshelf lined with volumes that looked actually read rather than decorative, a window overlooking the garden where twilight gathered like smoke. I need to tell you something, María said from the doorway. Alejandro looked up from the documents he'd been reviewing. Come in. She closed the door behind her and sat across from him. For a moment she just breathed, gathering courage for what came next. When I sent the DEA those photographs of Diego's ledgers, I didn't send everything. Alejandro went very still. What do you mean? I mean, I kept copies not just of the ledgers but of everything. Client lists, supplier contacts, distribution routes, names of every official he's paid off, 2 years of information. She met his eyes. I kept it as insurance, in case he found me before the DEA moved, in case I needed leverage. Where is it? Safe hidden. I can get it whenever I need to. Alejandro leaned back in his chair, studying her. Why are you telling me this now? Because Diego's not going to stop. He'll keep attacking until you're either destroyed or you fight back in a way he can't ignore. Those files I kept, they're not just evidence of crimes. They're a map of his entire operation. Every weakness, every vulnerability. If we use them correctly, we can dismantle him piece by piece. The DEA already has copies. They're building a case. The DEA moves slowly. They want airtight prosecution, years in prison, justice through the system. Maria's voice hardened. But we don't need justice. We need survival. And those files can give us something better than evidence. They can give us leverage. Alejandro was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing we stop playing defense. We use what I know about Diego's operation to hit him where it hurts, not through violence. That's his language and we'll lose if we speak it, but through information. We leak details to his partners, make them nervous. We tip off authorities about specific shipments, small ones he can afford to lose but that make him look sloppy. We create chaos in his organization until he's too busy putting out fires to keep attacking us. That's dangerous if he traces the leaks back to you. He'll kill me, I know, but he's going to try to kill me anyway, Alejandro. At least this way I'm fighting back. She leaned forward. You said you wanted to give me a second chance. I'm taking it, but I'm not just running anymore. I'm hunting. Alejandro stood and walked to the window. The garden below was dark now, the fountain invisible but audible, water whispering secrets to stone. He stood there for a long time, and María watched the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. If we do this, he said finally, not turning around, there's no going back. Diego will know someone's attacking him from the inside. He'll become paranoid, unpredictable. People will die. People are already dying. He killed my brother. He's killed others. How many more before someone stops him? And you think you're the one to stop him? I think I'm the only one who can. Maria's voice was steady. Because I know him, I know how he thinks, what he values, where he's vulnerable. The DEA can send him to prison eventually, maybe. But we can destroy his empire before they ever file charges. We can make him irrelevant. Alejandro turned to face her. And if he comes for you, if he finds this place, finds you, then you keep your promise, you protect my daughter. She placed both hands on her stomach. That's all I care about, her. If I can destroy Diego before she's born, she'll grow up free. If I can't, at least she'll grow up knowing her mother fought. The silence between them was heavy. Weighted with decision. Outside, the city hummed its eternal rhythm. Inside, two people who'd been running from their pasts decided to turn and fight. "All right," Alejandro said quietly, "show me what you have." Maria pulled out her phone and opened an encrypted app. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, navigating through folders and files. She turned the phone toward Alejandro. "This is Diego's supplier network in Sinaloa. 5 primary contacts who provide his product. If they start having problems, raids, competition, supply issues, Diego's entire distribution timeline collapses." Alejandro studied the names, the addresses, the detailed notes Maria had compiled. "You documented everything." "I'm very good at my job." Diego never realized that being invisible meant I saw everything. Over the next hour, Maria walked Alejandro through the files. The depth of information was staggering, not just names and numbers, but patterns, habits, vulnerabilities. She'd turned 2 years of silent observation into a weapon. "Here," she said, pointing to a particular entry. "Diego has a meeting with his Sinaloa contacts every 6 weeks, always the same location, a ranch outside Culiacan. He thinks it's secure because it's remote, but that predictability is a weakness." "You want to hit the meeting?" "No, I want to make him miss it. Create a crisis here in Jalisco that requires his attention the same day. Make him choose between maintaining his supply chain and dealing with immediate threats. Either way, he loses credibility." Alejandro smiled, a dangerous expression. "You've been planning this." "For 2 years, I just didn't have the resources to execute it." She looked at him steadily. "Now I do." They worked until after midnight, building a strategy that was part information warfare, part psychological operation. Every action designed to make Diego question his organization, his people, his control. By the time they finished, Maria was exhausted, her back aching, her daughter restless inside her, but she also felt something she hadn't felt in years. Power, real power, not the kind that came from fear or violence, but from knowledge and strategy, and the ability to see 3 moves ahead. Alejandro walked her back to her room. At the door, he paused. "Maria," he said quietly, "what you're doing, using those files, targeting Diego's operation, it makes you as dangerous to him as any rival he's ever faced. Maybe more dangerous because you're not playing by the rules he understands." "I know, and you're still willing to do this." She thought of Marco, of the 2 years she'd spent being afraid, of the daughter growing inside her, who deserved better than a world shaped by men like Diego Maldonado. "I'm willing," she said. "Are you?" Alejandro's expression softened just slightly. "I told you before, some fights are worth having. This is one of them." He left her then, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Maria entered her room and moved to the window. The garden below was dark, peaceful, untouched by the war that was about to explode. She placed her hand on the glass, feeling its coolness against her palm. Somewhere in Guadalajara, Diego Maldonado slept in his fortress, believing himself untouchable. Tomorrow that would change. Tomorrow the real war began. 2 days later, one of Diego's Sinaloa suppliers was raided by federal agents. Anonymous tip, they said, found 2 kilos hidden in a false compartment. The supplier was arrested, his operation shut down. 3 days after that, a second supplier's warehouse burned. Electrical fire, according to reports, but this time everyone whispered arson. By the end of the week, Diego had lost 2 of his 5 primary sources. His distribution timeline, normally precise as clockwork, was in chaos. And in Zapopan, in a facility hidden behind high walls in Bougainvillea, a pregnant woman smiled at the reports coming across her screen. The hunter had become the hunted. And Diego Maldonado didn't even know it yet. Diego Maldonado learned about the Sinaloa raids on a Tuesday morning while drinking coffee in his penthouse office overlooking Guadalajara's financial district. His assistant, a nervous man named Esteban who'd replaced Maria, delivered the news with trembling hands. "Both suppliers, senor, within 4 days, federal agents in both cases." Diego set down his coffee with careful precision. Coincidence? "The agents are saying anonymous tips, very specific information about locations, times, hidden compartments." "Someone talked. Or someone knew, senor." Diego stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. 30 stories below, the city sprawled in every direction, a kingdom he'd spent 20 years building. 2 suppliers lost in 1 week wasn't catastrophic. He had contingencies, backup sources, alternative routes, but it was concerning. Concerning because it suggested something worse than bad. "Look, it suggested a lake." "Find out who knew about those locations," Diego said quietly. "Everyone who had access to that information. I want names by tonight." "Yes, senor." After Esteban left, Diego remained at the window. His reflection stared back at him, sharp suit, graying temples, the face of a man who'd built an empire through intelligence and ruthlessness in equal measure. He thought about Maria, 3 weeks since she'd run, 3 weeks of searching that had turned up nothing but dead ends and false sightings. She'd vanished like smoke, taking something with her that gnawed at the edges of his control. "Fear?" Not his fear, he'd long ago forgotten what that felt like, but the fear of his organization. Whispers among his men that if Maria could disappear so completely, maybe she'd taken something with her. Information, evidence, leverage. He dismissed those whispers. Maria had been useful but unremarkable. A woman who filed papers and answered phones and said yes, senor, without ever asking why. But now, standing in his office with news of simultaneous raids on suppliers Maria had once scheduled shipments for, Diego felt the first cold finger of doubt. What if she hadn't been unremarkable? What if she'd been watching? He pulled out his phone and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. I need everything you have on Maria Fuentes, not just the basic background. I want deep investigation. Everyone she's talked to, everywhere she's been, anyone who might be hiding her. We've already been looking, senor. Look harder, Diego's voice dropped to something dangerous, and expand the search. Check for connections to my competitors, especially Vargas. There was a pause. Alejandro Vargas, you think? I think someone is helping her, and Vargas has been too quiet lately, too careful. That's not like him. We'll investigate. Do it quietly. I don't want Vargas knowing we're watching. Diego ended the call and returned to his desk. He opened a locked drawer and pulled out a file, thick with documents and photographs. His contingency file, the one that contained everything he needed to destroy competitors if negotiations failed. Alejandro Vargas's file was substantial. Businesses, properties, known associates, financial structures. Diego had been compiling it for years, the way a chess player studies an opponent. He'd never needed to use it. Their truce had held, maintained by mutual benefit and the understanding that war between them would cost both sides too much. But if Vargas was hiding Maria, if he was helping her, then the truce was already broken. Diego just needed proof. In Zapopan, Maria felt the shift before anyone reported it. A tension in the air, a change in frequency like the moment before thunder. She was in the war room when Torres received the call, his expression darkening as he listened. Understood, keep watching. He ended the call and looked at Maria and Alejandro. Diego's people are asking questions about Vargas, specifically whether he's had any unusual activity lately, new faces around his properties, changes in routine. He knows someone's helping her, Alejandro said, not a question. Or he suspects, Torres replied. Our source says Diego ordered deep investigation on Maria Fuentes, her connections, her contacts, anyone who might be hiding her. Maria's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, as if sensing her mother's anxiety. How long before he connects her to you? Depends on how thorough he is, Torres said. We've been careful, no paper trail, no visible connection. But if he starts surveillance, watches long enough, someone might notice. Alejandro's expression was granite. Then we accelerate, hit him harder, faster, before he has time to investigate. That's risky, Torres warned. If we move too aggressively, we confirm his suspicions. We're past subtlety, Alejandro turned to Maria. What's the next target? Maria pulled up her files, scanning through options. Her mind raced through scenarios, weighing risk against reward. His pharmaceutical company, the legitimate front, it's his pride, his proof that he's a respectable businessman. If we damage that reputation, we damage everything he's built. How? Quality control issues. His company distributes medication to hospitals and clinics across Jalisco. If those medications start having problems, contamination, incorrect dosages, expired inventory that should have been replaced, the health ministry will investigate. And unlike police investigations, Diego can't buy his way out of health violations. The media covers them. Patients sue. His respectable image crumbles. Santiago, who'd been listening from the corner, frowned. You're talking about actually contaminating medicine. People could get hurt. No, Maria said firmly. I'm talking about exposing medicine that's already compromised. Diego cuts costs by using expired inventory, relabeling it, selling it as fresh. He substitutes cheaper ingredients in some formulations to increase profit margins. I have documentation of shipments where the medication was below required potency. That's not sabotage, that's whistleblowing. Alejandro studied her. You can prove this. I have invoices, lab reports Diego buried, testimony from a quality control manager who quit rather than sign off on bad product. She pulled up files on her tablet. This isn't about hurting innocent people. It's about stopping someone who's already hurting them for profit. The room was silent for a moment, then Alejandro nodded slowly. If we expose this, the ministry will have to act. Diego's pharmaceutical company gets shut down pending investigation. That's his biggest legitimate revenue source gone. And his reputation, Maria added. Every politician he's bribed, every business associate who's overlooked his other activities because he ran a respectable company, they'll all distance themselves. He becomes toxic. Torres leaned back in his chair, thinking, it's good, clean, we're not breaking laws, we're exposing them. Even if Diego's suspects were behind it, he can't retaliate without confirming his own guilt. When can you have the evidence ready? Alejandro asked Maria. 2 days, I need to compile everything, create a dossier that's airtight. Then we send it to the health ministry, the media, and several patient advocacy groups simultaneously. Multiple sources, impossible to suppress. Do it, Alejandro looked at Torres. Increase security around the facility. If Diego's investigating, he might send people to watch. I want to know if anyone gets within 3 blocks of this place. Already done, Jefe. As the meeting dispersed, Maria remained in the war room, organizing files, building the case that would destroy Diego's legitimate empire. Her back ached from sitting too long. Her daughter pressed against her. Ribs uncomfortable, running out of room. Dr. Salazar had warned her just that morning. You're in your final month now. Any significant stress could trigger early labor. You need to rest. But rest felt like surrender, and Maria had surrendered enough. She worked through the afternoon. Through dinner she barely touched, into the evening when the facility grew quiet and the security lights cast long shadows across the garden. Around midnight, Alejandro found her still working. You need to sleep, he said from the doorway. Almost finished. He entered the room and gently closed her laptop. It'll be here tomorrow. You won't be any use to anyone if you collapse. Maria wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her. She nodded and stood, wincing as her back protested. Alejandro noticed immediately. How long has your back been hurting? Few hours, it's fine, just pregnancy. Have you told Dr. Salazar? It's not. Maria, his voice was firm but not unkind. Tell her tomorrow, please. She nodded again, too tired to fight. They walked together through the quiet hallways, past sleeping guards and security stations where men watched monitors with careful attention. At her door, Alejandro paused. What you're doing, building this case against Diego, it's brave, but it also makes you the most dangerous person in his world right now. I know, and if something happens, if we have to move you quickly. I'll be ready, she met his eyes. I've been ready since the day I ran. This isn't fear anymore, Alejandro, this is purpose. He studied her for a long moment and something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a fellow survivor. Get some rest, he said softly. Tomorrow we start the endgame. After he left, Maria lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to her daughter's movements inside her. The baby was active tonight, restless, as if she too sensed the approaching storm. Soon, Maria whispered her. Hand on her belly, soon you'll be born into a world where your mother isn't running, where the man who killed your uncle can't hurt us anymore. I promise you that. The baby kicked in response, and Maria smiled despite her exhaustion. Tomorrow, Diego's world would start to crack. The dossier reached the health ministry on Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, it had reached 3 major newspapers and 2 television stations. By Thursday evening, it was trending on social media. Pharmaceutical giant accused of distributing compromised medication. Health Ministry launches investigation into Maldonado Pharmaceuticals. Patients sue over defective drugs. The evidence was damning, meticulously documented, impossible to dismiss. Lab reports showing reduced potency. Invoices proving expired inventory had been relabeled. Testimony from former employees who'd witnessed the violations. Diego's attorneys issued immediate denials. His PR team launched a counter-campaign. His political allies made careful statements about waiting for investigation results. But the damage was done. Within 24 hours, 3 major hospital chains suspended their contracts with Maldonado Pharmaceuticals. The stock price of his publicly traded subsidiary dropped 30%. The health ministry announced inspections of every facility, every warehouse, every distribution center. And in his penthouse office, Diego Maldonado watched his respectable empire start to burn. He didn't rage, didn't throw things or scream at assistants. He simply sat at his desk, fingers steepled, mind working through the problem with surgical precision. Someone had done this, someone with access to internal documents, detailed knowledge of his operations, evidence that should have been destroyed years ago. Someone who'd been invisible long enough to compile a weapon. He picked up his phone and made a call. Find her, he said quietly. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who you have to lean on. Find María Fuentes and bring her to me, alive. Because Diego understood now what he should have known 3 weeks ago. María hadn't been running from him. She'd been preparing to destroy him. And somewhere in Guadalajara, she was still watching. Still planning. Still hunting. The war had shifted, the prey had become the predator. And Diego Maldonado, for the first time in 20 years, felt something he'd almost forgotten. Fear. The contractions started on a Saturday morning, subtle at first, just a tightening across Maria's abdomen that she dismissed as Braxton Hicks. She'd had them for weeks, false alarms that meant nothing, but these were different, more insistent, coming in waves that made her pause mid-sentence while explaining Diego's financial structure to Torres. Maria Torres noticed her grip the edge of the table. Are you? I'm fine, she breathed through it, waiting for the tightness to pass. Just give me a moment. But the moment stretched, and when the contraction finally released its grip, she felt something else. A warm trickle down her leg. She looked down at the wet spot on her dress, and her stomach dropped. Get Dr. Salazar, she said quietly. Now. Torres was out of the room before she finished speaking. Maria lowered herself carefully into a chair, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the armrest. The baby was coming, 3 weeks early, in the middle of a war, in a safe house that might not be safe much longer. Perfect timing, she thought with grim humor, just perfect. Dr. Salazar arrived within minutes, calm and efficient. One examination was all it took. Your water broke, you're in early labor. The doctor pulled out her phone. I'm calling for an ambulance, you need to be in a hospital. No, Maria's voice was firm despite the fear crawling up her throat. No hospitals. Diego has people watching hospitals, the moment my name appears in any system. Then we'll use a false name. And when complications arise, when they need my medical history, when questions get asked, Maria shook her head. No hospitals. Dr. Salazar's expression hardened. Maria, I'm a general practitioner. I can handle routine births in controlled environments, but if something goes wrong, if there are complications, this facility doesn't have the equipment. Then we pray nothing goes wrong. That's not a medical strategy. It's the only strategy I have. Alejandro appeared in the doorway, summoned by Torres. He took in the scene immediately, Maria in the chair, the wet floor, Dr. Salazar's worried expression. What do you need? He asked the doctor. A hospital, Dr. Salazar said flatly, but she's refusing. Alejandro looked at Maria. Is it because of Diego? He has people watching every hospital in Jalisco, private hospitals, public clinics, everything. If I check in under any name, real or false, and someone sees me, reports me. She didn't need to. Finish the sentence. Alejandro was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, Dr. Salazar, can you deliver the baby here safely? Under normal circumstances, yes, but if there are complications, hemorrhaging, fetal distress, the need for emergency surgery, we'd have minutes at best to get her to a hospital, and minutes might not be enough. But it's possible you can do this here. Dr. Salazar hesitated, clearly unhappy with the situation. Possible, yes. Advisable, no. Those are my only two options, Maria said through gritted teeth as another contraction began. Possible here or certain death at a hospital Diego's watching. Alejandro made his decision. Torres, clear the medical room, get everything Dr. Salazar needs. Santiago, I want every entrance to this facility secured. No one gets within 2 blocks without us knowing. Rafael, contact our people at hospitals anyway. If something goes wrong, we'll need emergency transport, and I want routes planned. The men scattered to execute his orders. Alejandro crouched beside Maria's chair. You're sure about this? She managed a weak smile. I haven't been sure about anything since the day I ran, but I'm still here, so is she. Her hand pressed against her belly. We'll figure it out. We always do, he said softly, and helped her to her feet. Labor was nothing like the sanitized versions Maria had seen in movies. It was raw, exhausting, a relentless marathon of pain that carved away everything except the primal need to survive. Dr. Salazar had converted one of the facility's rooms into a makeshift delivery ward. Clean sheets, medical equipment, monitors for the baby's heartbeat. It looked professional enough, but Maria could see the tension in the doctor's movements, the way she kept glancing at her watch, calculating time and risk. The contractions intensified as the afternoon wore into evening. Hours blurred together. Maria lost track of time, of everything except the rhythm of pain and breath and the sound of her daughter's heartbeat on the monitor, steady and strong despite everything. Alejandro stayed. Dr. Salazar had tried to send him out, but Maria had gripped his hand and said, "Stay, please." So he stayed, standing beside her, letting her squeeze his hand hard enough to leave marks, speaking quietly when the pain became too much. "Breathe, you're doing well, just a little more." His voice was steady, an anchor in the storm. Maria focused on it, used it to pull herself through each wave. Around midnight, Diego made his move. Torres burst into the room, his expression grim. "Jefe, we have a situation. 3 SUVs just pulled up 2 blocks away. Armed men, they're asking residents if they've seen a pregnant woman." Alejandro's jaw tightened. How did he find us? Someone talked, or he's been systematically searching every property I've ever owned. Torres glanced at Maria, then back to Alejandro. They haven't reached this building yet, but they will, maybe 10 minutes. Then we stop them before they get here. Alejandro released Maria's hand carefully. I need to. No, Maria's voice was hoarse but fierce. You leave this room, you're choosing violence, that's what Diego wants. He wants you to react like a criminal so he can justify coming in with guns. Maria, if they get inside. They won't, she gritted her teeth through another contraction. Call the police, right now. Report suspicious armed men in the neighborhood. Get squad cars here before Diego's people reach the gate. Alejandro stared at her. You want me to call the police? You're legitimate now, remember, you have nothing to hide. This is a private medical facility. You have permits, licenses, everything legal. Diego's men are trespassing with illegal weapons. Maria's eyes were fierce despite the pain. Use the law against him. That's the one thing he can't fight. Torres was already pulling out his phone. She's right, if police arrive first. Diego's men have to retreat or risk arrest. We can claim we felt threatened by armed intruders. Alejandro hesitated for only a second, then he nodded. Make the call and get our attorneys on standby. If Diego tries anything, I want legal action filed before sunrise. As Torres left to coordinate, another contraction hit Maria, stronger than before. Dr. Salazar checked her progress. You're at 8 centimeters. It won't be much longer now. How much longer? Maria gasped. An hour, maybe 2. Through the window they could hear sirens approaching. The police, responding to Torres' call about armed men in the residential area. Then shouting outside, angry voices, the sound of vehicles departing hastily. Santiago appeared in the doorway. Diego's men left. The police are asking questions, but we told them we called because we saw armed strangers casing the neighborhood. They're filing a report. Good. Alejandro's hand found Maria's again. You see, we're still here. You're still safe. But Maria barely heard him. The contractions were coming faster now, relentless, consuming. Dr. Salazar moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for delivery. On the next contraction, I need you to push. Maria, can you hear me? I need you to push. Maria pushed and pushed again and again. Time lost all meaning. There was only pain and pressure and the sound of Dr. Salazar's voice guiding her through. Good. Again, I can see the head. One more, Maria, one more big push. Maria gathered everything she had left, every ounce of strength, every moment of fear and anger and desperate hope, and pushed. The baby's cry filled the room. Small, furious, alive. Dr. Salazar lifted the infant, tiny and red and perfect. A girl, healthy, 10 fingers, 10 toes, lungs that work very well. She smiled. Congratulations, Maria. Maria was crying and didn't know when the tears had started. Dr. Salazar placed the baby on her chest, still attached by the umbilical cord, still wet. With birth but warm and moving and real. Elena, Maria whispered the name she'd chosen weeks ago, Elena Fuentes. The baby's eyes opened, dark and unfocused, searching for her mother's face. Maria looked down at her daughter and felt something shift inside her chest, a reordering of the universe. Everything that had mattered before, revenge, survival, fear, suddenly became secondary to this tiny person whose entire world was the sound of her mother's heartbeat. Alejandro stood at the edge of the scene, watching. When Maria looked up at him, she saw something unexpected in his expression, not just relief or happiness but grief, the shadow of a sister who'd never gotten this moment, a niece who'd never been born. Alejandro, Maria said softly, come here. He approached slowly, as if afraid the moment was too fragile to disturb. When he stood beside the bed, Maria shifted Elena slightly so he could see her better. You saved us, both of us. Would you like to hold her? I don't. I've never. Neither have I. We'll figure it out together. Dr. Salazar intervened, finishing with the umbilical cord and cleaning Elena gently before wrapping her in a soft blanket. Then she placed the infant carefully in Alejandro's arms. He held her like she was made of glass, barely breathing, his entire body rigid with fear of doing something wrong. But Elena simply yawned, unbothered by the change, and settled against his chest. She's so small, he whispered. She's strong, Maria replied, like her mother. Alejandro looked at Maria, and something passed between them that neither could name. Gratitude, yes, trust, certainly, but something else too. Something that had been building through weeks of late-night planning and shared danger, and the quiet understanding that they were no longer separate people fighting separate wars. They were something new, something neither had expected. A family maybe, or the beginning of one. Dr. Salazar broke the moment. Gently, Maria needs to rest now, and Elena needs to eat. Alejandro, if you could. He handed the baby back reluctantly, as if releasing something precious he'd only just discovered. I'll let you rest, but if you need anything. I know where to find you. After he left, Dr. Salazar helped Maria with nursing, showed her how to hold Elena, how to know when the baby was feeding properly. It was awkward at first, clumsy, but Elena figured it out faster than Maria did, latching on with determination that made the doctor laugh. She knows what she wants, that's good, that's a survivor. When Elena finally fell asleep, exhausted from the work of being born, Maria held her and stared at her daughter's perfect face. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a tiny nose, lips that pursed even in sleep as if dreaming of milk. Your Uncle Marco would have loved you, Maria whispered. He would have spoiled you with toys and taught you bad jokes and protected you from everything. Elena slept on, unbothered by the history she'd been born into. But he can't protect you, so I will, and I will make sure the man who killed him can never hurt you. Maria's voice hardened, even as tears slipped down her cheeks. I promise you that me, Amor, you will grow up free. Outside, the night deepened. Police cars had long since departed. Diego's men had retreated to regroup and plan. The facility was quiet again, protected by walls and guards and the thin veneer of legality. But everyone knew the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Because Diego Maldonado now knew three things he hadn't known that morning. María was in Guadalajara. She was with Alejandro Vargas, and she'd just given birth to his child, a daughter he'd never know existed, but whose very existence made María vulnerable in a way she'd never been before. A mother would do anything to protect her child. Diego understood that kind of desperation, and he would use it. The first week of Elena's life passed in a haze. Sleepless nights and endless diaper changes. María had read books about motherhood, had imagined what it would be like, but nothing prepared her for the reality. The constant feeding every 2 hours, the crying that meant hunger or discomfort, or simply the shock of existing outside the womb, the profound exhaustion that made her bones ache. But also the wonder, Elena's tiny fingers wrapping around her thumb, the way she smelled like milk and something indefinably sweet, the small noises she made while sleeping, soft grunts and sighs that made Maria's chest tighten with fierce protectiveness. Dr. Salazar visited twice daily, checking Maria's recovery, Elena's weight gain, making sure both mother and daughter were thriving. "You're doing well," she said on day 5, "better than most first-time mothers in your situation." My situation being hunted by a cartel leader. Dr. Salazar smiled grimly. I was thinking more about the lack of support system. No family, no partner, just you and your instincts, but yes, the cartel leader doesn't help. Alejandro came by every evening, always at the same time, as if it were scheduled business rather than something personal. He brought things María needed, clothes that actually fit her post-pregnancy body, books about infant care, a mobile that played soft music for Elena's bassinet. He never stayed long, never imposed, but his presence had become a constant, like the sunrise or the sound of the fountain in the garden. On day 8, María found him in the war room late at night. She shouldn't have been out of bed, Dr. Salazar would scold her. But Elena was finally sleeping in the capable hands of a nurse Alejandro had hired, and María needed to know what was happening beyond the walls of her room. "You should be resting," Alejandro said, without looking up from the documents spread across the table. "So should you," María approached, studying the papers, financial reports, surveillance logs, police reports. "What's Diego doing?" Getting desperate, Alejandro pointed to a document. "His pharmaceutical company is hemorrhaging money. The health ministry investigation found violations in 6 facilities. They've suspended his license to operate pending remediation. His stock price has dropped 60%. 3 board members have resigned." "Good. But he's not collapsing, he's consolidating." Alejandro pulled up another file. "He's liquidating legitimate assets, pulling money out of the pharmaceutical business, converting everything to cash. That suggests he's planning something that requires liquidity." María felt cold understanding settle in her stomach. He's going to buy his way out, pay whoever he needs to pay, bribe whoever he needs to bribe, and rebuild somewhere else. Or he's funding something else, something that requires immediate capital. Alejandro met her eyes. Torres has been hearing rumors. Diego's asking questions about military contractors, men who work outside legal channels, the kind you hire when you want a problem solved permanently. "He's coming for me." "For both of us probably, but you're the priority. You're the source of all his current problems. If he eliminates you, the investigation might stall. The leaks stop. He can claim it was all fabricated by a disgruntled former employee." María sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "How long do we have?" "Maybe a week if we're lucky." Alejandro's voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I've increased security. 24-hour surveillance, armed guards at every entrance, backup protocols if we need to evacuate. But if Diego brings in professionals, real operators with military training, they'll find a way through eventually. Then we can't wait for them to come to us." Maria's mind was already working through scenarios, strategies. "We need to end this before Elena gets caught in the crossfire." "How Diego's in hiding now, after the police showed up." "Last week he's paranoid. He's changed locations 3 times. Even my sources don't know where he's staying." "But I do." María pulled out her phone, opened her encrypted files. "Diego has a place he goes when he needs to think, when everything is falling apart and he needs to plan. It's not on any property records. It's his mother's old house in Tlajumulco, maintained under a cousin's name. He took me there once when I first started working for him, showed me where he grew up. He thinks it's sentimental, untouchable, because no one knows about it." Alejandro leaned forward. "You're sure he'd go there now?" "When he's desperate, yes, it's where he feels safe." Maria's voice hardened. "It's also isolated, residential neighborhood, but the house is set back from the street. Large yard, few neighbors." "You want to hit him there?" "I want to end this, one way or another." Alejandro was quiet for a long moment, studying her. "María, if we do this, if we go after Diego directly, there's no turning back. This stops being about information warfare and becomes something else, something that could get us all killed. We're already marked for death, at least this way we choose the battlefield. And Elena, if something happens to you. If something happens to me, you promise to protect her. Keep that promise, Alejandro. Raise her somewhere far from here. Give her a life where she doesn't have to run. Maria's eyes were fierce, but I'm not planning to die. I'm planning to win. The conviction in her voice left no room for argument. Alejandro nodded slowly. All right, tell me about the house. Every detail. We'll need to plan this carefully. They worked through the night, building a strategy that was part raid, part ambush, part psychological operation. Maria sketched the layout of the house from memory: 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen that opened to a back patio, a garage that could fit 2 cars. She marked where Diego would likely position himself, which rooms offered exits, where security vulnerabilities existed. He'll have guards, Maria said, at least 2, maybe 4. He trusts them more than technology, men who have been with him for years. How loyal are they? Very, but they're not suicidal. If they think Diego's already lost, they might save themselves rather than die for him. And we make them think he's lost. Alejandro pulled up a map on his tablet. We hit the house at dawn. Security is lowest then. We bring enough men to look overwhelming, but not so many that we can't move quietly. We give Diego's guards one chance to walk away. The ones who take it live, the ones who don't. He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Maria understood the language of finality. When, she asked. Tomorrow, we move tomorrow at dawn. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not, you just gave birth 8 days ago. And I know Diego better than anyone in this room. I know how he thinks, how he reacts when cornered. You need me there. Mario. This is my fight, Alejandro. It started when he killed Marco. It continues because of what he did to me. And it ends when I look him in the eye and show him I'm not afraid anymore. Her voice didn't waver. I'm coming. Alejandro looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. He'd learned over the past weeks that Maria Fuentes wasn't someone who could be protected from her own decisions. Fine, but you stay in the vehicle until we've secured the building. You don't go inside until I know it's safe. Agreed. They continued planning until sunrise painted the windows gold. Tours arrived to brief the team. Santiago checked weapons and equipment. Rafael coordinated with their legal team, making sure they had documentation that would hold up if police got involved. Because this had to look legitimate, a concerned citizen reporting suspicious activity, a security team responding to threats, everything documented. Everything legal, everything defensible in court. They weren't criminals anymore. They were businessmen protecting their interests. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Maria spent the day with Elena, memorizing every detail of her daughter's face, the way her eyes were starting to focus better, the small birthmark on her left shoulder, the way she grabbed at Maria's hair when nursing. I'm coming back, Maria whispered to her sleeping daughter. I promise you, I'm coming back, and when I do, we'll be free, really free. Elena slept on, trusting in a way that broke Maria's heart. That evening, Dr. Salazar examined Maria one final time. Physically, you're healing well, but emotionally, mentally. I'm fine. You're about to confront the father of your child, a violent man who wants you dead, less than 2 weeks after giving birth. You're not fine. You're running on adrenaline and maternal instinct. Maria met the doctor's eyes. That's all I need. Doctor. Salazar sighed. If anything happens tomorrow, if you're injured, you need to get to a hospital immediately. Your body is still healing. You're vulnerable to infection, hemorrhaging. I'll be careful. Maria, I'm serious. You could die from complications that would be minor under normal circumstances. I understand, but I'm still going. After the doctor left, Maria sat in the quiet nursery, rocking Elena, singing softly in Spanish. Lullabies her mother had sung to her years ago, before the cancer had taken her, before Marco had become her only family, before everything had led to this moment. Luna lunara cascablara, que los niños duermen y los padres también. Elena's eyes drifted closed, her tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Maria placed her carefully in the bassinet, tucking the blanket around her small body. Alejandro appeared in the doorway, silent, respectful of the moment. When Maria looked at him, she saw something in his expression that hadn't been there before: fear, not for himself, but for her. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I can handle Diego. You can stay here with Elena where it's safe. Safe is an illusion. Diego will keep coming until one of us is dead. This ends tomorrow. She crossed to him, standing close enough to see the tension in his jaw. But thank you for everything, for saving me that day in the Mercado, for protecting Elena, for making me remember that I'm more than what fear made me. Mario. She kissed him, not softly, not tentatively, but with all the desperation and gratitude and something else she didn't have words for. For a moment, Alejandro froze, surprised. Then his arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, returning the kiss with equal intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Maria smiled. For luck, and because I needed to know what that felt like before tomorrow. We're both coming back tomorrow, Alejandro said, his voice rough. Both of us. That's not a hope, it's a plan. Then make sure your plan is good. He smiled, rare and genuine. My plans are always good, I just have better motivation now. They stood together in the doorway of the nursery, watching Alina sleep. Two people who'd been running from different ghosts, now standing still long enough to find something worth fighting for. Outside, the night deepened. The city hummed its endless rhythm. And somewhere in Tlajomulco, Diego Maldonado sat in his mother's old house, planning his revenge, unaware that his prey had become the hunter. Dawn was coming, and with it the end of everything. One way or another. Dawn came slowly to Tlajomulco, light bleeding through morning fog that clung to the streets like smoke. The residential neighborhood was quiet at this hour, dogs still sleeping, workers not yet stirring, only the distant sound of a truck making early deliveries breaking the silence. 3 black SUVs rolled through the mist with their headlights off. Moving like shadows, they parked 2 blocks from the target house, disgorging men who moved with military precision. 12 in total, all armed but disciplined, all trained to use force only as a last resort. Because this wasn't a raid, it was a reckoning. María sat in the lead vehicle, watching through tinted windows as Alejandro's team positioned themselves around the property. Torres and 4 men approaching from the back, Santiago with 3 more covering the sides. Alejandro himself moving toward the front entrance with the remaining team members. Stay here, Alejandro had told her before exiting. No matter what you hear, stay in this vehicle until I come get you. She'd nodded, lied with her silence. Because she hadn't survived 2 years of Diego's control and 3 weeks of running just to wait in a car while someone else finished her fight. Through an earpiece connected to Alejandro's radio, María heard Torres' quiet voice. Back entrance secured, 2 guards inside. Both armed, they haven't spotted us yet. Santiago next, side access clear, no external security, looks like he's keeping this quiet. Then Alejandro, calm as always, front door in position on my count, 3, 2, 1. The operation unfolded with surgical efficiency. Alejandro's team breached the front door, unlocked, surprisingly. Torres' men entered through the back simultaneously. The 2 guards inside barely had time to reach for their weapons before they were surrounded, disarmed, and forced to their knees. No shots fired, no violence, just overwhelming force and the understanding that resistance meant death. María waited 30 seconds, then she opened the vehicle door and stepped into the morning cold. The driver, a young man named Luis, immediately protested. "Señora, you can't." "I can and I am." She moved toward the house before he could stop her. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and old photographs. It was modest, nothing like Diego's penthouse. Guadalajara worn furniture, family pictures on the walls, a kitchen with outdated appliances. This was where Diego Maldonado had come from before the empire, before the violence, when he'd been just a boy in a poor neighborhood dreaming of something more. The guards were being restrained in the living room, zip-tied and silent. They'd made the smart choice, surrender over suicide. Alejandro stood in the hallway, his expression darkening when he saw María. "I told you to stay in the car." "I don't take orders from you." She moved past him toward the back of the house where Torres stood outside a closed bedroom door. "Is he in there?" Torres nodded. "Locked, won't come out, says he wants to negotiate." "With whom?" "He asked for you specifically." María and Alejandro exchanged glances. Then she approached the door and knocked twice. "Diego, it's me. Open the door." Silence, then the sound of a lock turning. The door opened a crack, revealing Diego Maldonado's face. He looked older than she remembered, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, and the kind of exhaustion that came from weeks of losing. "María," his voice was surprisingly soft. "You look well, motherhood suits you." "Let me in, we need to talk." Alone. Alejandro started to protest, but María silenced him with a look. "This conversation is mine, stay outside." Diego opened the door wider, allowing her to enter. The bedroom was small, a single bed with a faded quilt, a dresser with more family photographs, a window overlooking the backyard where a swing set rusted in the morning light. Diego closed the door behind her but didn't lock it. He moved to sit on the bed, and María noticed for the first time that he wasn't armed. No gun visible, no weapon within reach, just a man in rumpled clothes who looked like he'd forgotten how to sleep. 8 days ago, Diego said quietly, you had the baby, a girl. Maria's blood turned cold. How did you? I have people everywhere. María, even in Vargas's circle, someone always talks. He smiled, sad and distant. Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt her. I'm not a monster. You killed my brother. I did. No denial, no excuse. Marco was weak. He wanted out when he should have known there's no out. I made an example because I needed the others to understand. Business, not personal. It's personal to me. I know. Diego looked at his hands, rough and scarred despite the expensive manicures. I've been thinking about that, about Marco, about you, about all the choices that led us here. He gestured vaguely at the room, the house, the situation. My mother died in this room, cancer, same as yours. I was 16. She made me promise I'd be better than the neighborhood, better than the poverty, better than my father who drank himself to death. I've spent 30 years keeping that promise. By becoming a drug trafficker. By surviving, his eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something other than calculation, grief maybe, or regret. The pharmaceutical company was my mother's dream. She wanted me to help people heal them. I built that company for her. And yes, I did other things to fund it, things she wouldn't have approved of, but the company itself was real. It helped people. Until you started cutting corners for profit, selling expired medication, compromising quality to increase margins. Diego flinched. That was a mistake. I got too comfortable. Started thinking like a businessman instead of a healer. You were never a healer, Diego. You were always a predator. Maria's voice was steady, controlled. You killed Marco because he wanted freedom. You would have killed me for the same reason, and you'll keep killing until someone stops you. Is that why you're here, to stop me? I'm here to give you a choice. Maria pulled a folder from inside her jacket, documents she'd prepared the night before. These are confessions, signed statements from 3 of your distributors who have agreed to testify against you in exchange for reduced sentences. Bank records showing money laundering through your pharmaceutical company. Evidence of bribes paid to officials. Everything the DEA needs to put you away for 20 years minimum. Diego took the folder, scanning the contents. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture deflated slightly. You've been thorough. I learned from the best. So this is it. You turn me over to the authorities, I go to prison, and you get your revenge. No, Maria's voice softened slightly. I give you another option. You liquidate everything, the pharmaceutical company, the distribution network, all of it. You turn yourself in to the DEA, cooperate fully with their investigation. In exchange, they offer you a plea deal, 10 years instead of 20, maybe less with good behavior. Diego stared at her. Why would you offer me that? Because Alina deserves to grow up in a world where her mother isn't a murderer, and because killing you won't bring Marco back, it'll just make me like you. Maria stepped closer. I want justice, Diego, real justice, not vengeance disguised as righteousness. I want you to face consequences through the system, not through a bullet. And if I refuse, if I choose to fight, then Alejandro's men take you by force. The DEA gets you anyway, but the plea deal disappears. You spend the rest of your life in a maximum security prison, alone, forgotten. She paused. Or you make the smart choice, the one your mother would have wanted. You stop running and face what you've done. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of history and pain. Outside, Maria could hear Alejandro's voice giving quiet orders, the sound of the captured guards being moved. Diego set the folder down carefully. You've changed. The woman I knew, she would have been too afraid to confront me like this. That woman died the day you killed her brother. I'm what? Survived. He smiled, a genuine expression that made him look younger, almost human. I'm glad. The world needs fewer victims and more survivors. He stood slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. All right, I'll take your deal. I'll cooperate with the DEA, but I have one condition. Maria tensed. What? Baby Alina, when she's old enough to ask about her father, you tell her the truth. Not the sanitized version, not the monster in the bedtime story. The truth, that I did terrible things for reasons I thought were justified, that I hurt people I shouldn't have, but that in the end I chose to stop running. His eyes were serious. She deserves to know who she comes from, even if it's ugly. Maria considered this. I'll tell her the truth, but I'll also tell her she gets to choose who she becomes. That blood doesn't determine destiny. Fair enough. Diego moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Maria, I'm sorry about Marco, about what I put you through. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I understand now what I took from you. Understanding doesn't undo harm, but it's a start. Diego opened the door. Alejandro was there immediately, weapon drawn, eyes assessing the situation. Maria stepped out first. He's surrendering, she said calmly. Contact your DEA connections. Tell them we have Diego Maldonado, and he's ready to cooperate fully in exchange for a plea agreement. Alejandro studied her face, then Diego's. You're sure? I'm sure. Within 20 minutes, the house was swarming with federal agents. The DEA had been building their case for months, waiting for enough evidence to move. Maria's files had given them probable cause. Diego's surrender gave them the confession they needed. Special Agent Morales, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, took Maria's statement personally. You realize you're a witness now. You'll need to testify, probably multiple times. Diego's attorneys will attack your credibility. Let them try. Maria's voice was steel. I have documentation for everything. 2 years of evidence they can't discredit. And you're willing to go public, put your name in the news. Maria thought of Alina sleeping peacefully in a bassinet back at the facility. Yes, because hiding is what victims do, and I'm done being a victim. Agent Morales smiled. Then let's make sure justice is served. The sun was fully up by the time they left Tlajomulco. Diego sat in the back of a federal vehicle, wrists cuffed, heading toward a detention facility where he'd await trial. His guards had been arrested. His empire was being dismantled by federal agents who descended on every property, every account, every connection. Maria sat in Alejandro's SUV, watching the city wake up around them. Normal people starting normal days, unaware that a war had just ended in a quiet residential neighborhood. "How do you feel?" Alejandro asked. "Thought about it, tired, relieved, empty maybe. I spent so long focused on surviving, on fighting back, that now that it's over, I don't know what comes next." "Whatever you want comes next. You're free, Maria, really free." Free, the word felt foreign, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak, but also right, correct, final. "I want to go home," she said softly, "back to the facility. I want to hold my daughter and sleep for approximately 3 days. Alejandro smiled. "That can be arranged." They drove through Guadalajara as the city came alive. Markets opening, children walking to school, the ordinary miracle of life continuing despite everything. Maria watched it all through the window, feeling like a ghost returning to the world of the living. At the facility, Dr. Salazar met them at the entrance, Alina bundled in her arms. "She's been fussy all morning. I think she missed you." Maria took her daughter carefully, and Alina immediately settled, as if she'd been waiting. For exactly this, the weight of her, the warmth, the small sounds she made, it anchored Maria in a way nothing else could. "It's over," Maria whispered to Alina. "The man who killed your uncle can't hurt us anymore. You're safe, really, truly safe." Alina yawned, unimpressed by the drama, and nuzzled against Maria's chest. Alejandro watched them, something soft and unguarded in his expression. "What will you do now? Stay in Guadalajara, or—" "I don't know yet. I need to testify at Diego's trial. That'll take months, probably. After that," she looked up at him. "What about you? Your empire survived, but it's different now. Legitimate, clean." "Strange, isn't it? I spent 15 years building something in the shadows, and in 3 weeks you helped me drag it into the light." He stepped closer. "I'm not who I was, Maria. This city isn't big enough for the man I'm trying to become. I've been thinking about moving operations. Mexico City maybe, or further, the United States, places where my past doesn't follow quite so closely." "Running." "Relocating, there's a difference," he smiled. "And I was hoping you and Alina might consider relocating with me, not because you need protection anymore, but because," he hesitated, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen him, "because I'd like to see what comes next for both of us together." Maria looked at him, this man who'd saved her life, protected her daughter, helped her become someone stronger than fear. She thought about the kiss they'd shared the night before, about the quiet moments in the war room, planning strategies and building trust, about the way he held Alina, gentle despite his capacity for violence. "I think," she said slowly, "that I'd like to see what comes next too, but slowly, one day at a time, no promises except honesty." "I can work with that." Alina chose that moment to start crying, demanding food with the urgency only a newborn possessed. Maria laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. "First priority, feed my daughter. Second priority, sleep. Third priority, figure out how to be a normal person again. And fourth priority, maybe figure out what normal even means for people like us." Alejandro smiled, and for the first time since Maria had met him, he looked peaceful. "I look forward to finding out." 6 months later, Maria sat in a courtroom in Guadalajara, her hand raised, swearing to tell the truth. Diego Maldonado sat at the defense table, thinner now, prison jumpsuit replacing expensive suits, but his eyes were clear, focused, resigned to consequences. Maria testified for 3 hours, every detail of Diego's operation, every crime she'd witnessed, every document she'd filed that showed the truth behind the pharmaceutical empire. Diego's attorneys tried to discredit her, but the evidence was overwhelming. 2 years of meticulous documentation couldn't be dismissed. When the verdict came 2 weeks later, guilty on 18 counts, Diego showed no emotion, just a small nod, as if confirming something he'd already known. The judge sentenced him to 15 years with possibility of parole in 10. Diego had cooperated, provided information that led to 30 other arrests. Justice, the judge said, required both punishment and redemption. After the sentencing, Maria stood outside the courthouse, Alina in a carrier against her chest. The baby was bigger now, alert and curious, watching the world with dark eyes that saw everything. Agent Morales approached, offering her hand. "You did good in there. Diego's organization is finished. Everything he built gone. You should be proud." "I'm just glad it's over." "It's never really over. There's always another Diego, another empire, another war," Morales smiled. "But you don't have to fight them all. You've done enough." After she left, Alejandro appeared from where he'd been waiting by the car. He testified too, though less dramatically. His transformation to legitimate businessman was nearly complete. Romano Logistics now operated in 3 countries, all legal, all transparent. The past hadn't disappeared, but it was fading. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." They drove to the airport together, 2 plane tickets to Mexico City, a new apartment waiting. New jobs, Maria consulting for nonprofits that helped women escape violence, Alejandro expanding his business into territory where his name meant nothing except success. Alina slept through the flight peaceful, unaware that she was leaving behind the city where her story had begun in violence and fear. When she woke, it would be in a different place, a different life. One where her mother wasn't running, where the monsters that had chased them were locked behind bars or buried in the past, where freedom meant waking up each morning without fear. Maria looked out the airplane window as Guadalajara disappeared beneath clouds. Somewhere down there, Marco's grave rested in a cemetery she'd visited one. Last time before leaving, she'd placed flowers and told him that justice had finally come, that Alina would grow up knowing her uncle had been loved, that his death hadn't been meaningless. Legendro's hand found hers warm and steady. She squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. "What are you thinking?" he asked quietly. Maria looked at Alina sleeping peacefully, then at Alejandro, then out at the endless sky. "I'm thinking," she said softly, "that some debts get paid, some wounds heal, and some people get second chances they don't deserve but need anyway. Which one are we?" She smiled. "All three." The plane climbed higher, leaving the past behind, carrying them toward whatever came next. And for the first time in 3 years, Maria Fuentes, survivor, mother, witness, warrior, allowed herself to believe that what came next might actually be good. That the woman who'd fainted in a Guadalajara mercado, desperate and dying, had become someone stronger. Someone free. And that Alina would grow up knowing her mother hadn't just survived. She'd won.